Good morning and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper. These are the topics that we shall be discussing today. But before we start, an important announcement. If you're preparing for CSAT 2025 and want to join our live online classroom program, then you can do that only till 28th of August this month. Why? Because on the 29th of August, we are launching the last batch for CSAT 2025 known as the Liberty batch. Because that is how we can complete the entire syllabus of the civil services exam much ahead of your examination in 2025. And there is another reason why, if you're considering joining this program, consider it now. Because if you enroll now till 28th of August, you can get 1 year subscription at less than 25k. Plus, if you will use this code IAS English, you will get 3 months free extension as well. If you will go on the website, you will search for the subscription prices, you will see a variance. But using this code, you can get the 12-month subscription plus 3 months free extension at less than 25k. But also, those aspirants who want to subscribe for 2-year or 3-year programs, they will get 6 months of free extension as well. So this was a brief announcement. Let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper. After the newspaper analysis is over, you can join my Telegram channel as well, should you wish to know more about Indian polity. Fresh allegations. Royal Kerala film industry in aftermath of Hema Committee report. Let's try and understand this newspaper article in great detail. The year was 2012, December 2012 to be precise. 16th December to be even more precise. Nirbhaya was gang raped in a moving bus along with her friend who was also assaulted. There was a huge outcry in the aftermath of this horrific gang rape. This ultimately led to the formation of Justice Verma Committee. Justice Verma Committee gave its recommendations, and ultimately it led to amendment to the criminal laws in the year 2013, when the definition of rape also changed. For example, the minimum punishment for rape was enhanced from 7 years to 10 years. Not just that, the definition of a rape was also changed, where there is a man who is in the position of authority. For example, what is rape? Rape is sexual assault against the will of the woman. Now, if there is a man who may be a college professor, who may be your employer, who may be your manager, who may be your boss, and this man enjoys and wields influence over this woman. Now, if this man forces sexual encounter with this woman cannot say no, because she is under the grip of this man who wields authority over this woman. So even if she is not saying no, but it is clearly no, because she can't say no because she is under the influence of this man. Even this would be rape, because the sexual encounter by a man who has authority, who wields influence over a woman, that woman may not give consent, and ultimately this falls within the definition of rape. So far-reaching changes were made to our criminal laws, specifically when it comes to the incidents of rape in the year 2013, based on the recommendations of Justice Verma Committee in the aftermath of December 2012 Nirbhaya gang rape. But then something else happened. The year was 2017. A famous Malayalam film actress alleged that she was assaulted, sexually assaulted, and she was also abducted near Kochi, which led to the arrest of a popular actor, Mr. Dilip, in Kerala as well. In this aftermath, a committee was formed Women's Collective in Cinema. A committee was formed in Kerala so that this organization can focus on creating safe environment for women who are working in the Malayalam film industry. And based on the activism launched by this women's collective, the state government was forced to set up a committee headed by Justice Hema, known as Hema Committee, to investigate into the allegations of sexual misconduct in the Malayalam film industry, because the allegations of sexual misconduct, casting couch, misogynist statements, creating a group which forces other women to go out of the Malayalam film industry, all these investigations were to be carried out, all these reports were to be submitted by Justice Hema Committee. But this report was not made public. State Information Commission in Kerala asked the state government to make this report public. Then the matter reached the Kerala High Court, and it was only after the insistence on the orders, on the directives of the Kerala High Court, that finally this report was made public. And when this report was made public, it unearthed series of allegations and shocking instances of misogyny in the Malayalam film industry. As if taking cue from this report, now more and more women are coming out and sharing their experiences of sexual misconduct and sexual harassment at the hands of so-called top personalities in the Malayalam film industry. But something else happened after 2017. In 2018, a Me Too movement was launched, which originally started in the West, but then shook India as well, where women were complaining of sexual harassment at workplaces, where for sexual favors, the women were subjected to torture, cruelty, and inhuman treatment. And these men who were accused of sexual harassment, they were wielding enormous influence and power in the society. And it takes a lot of courage for women to speak against those men who enjoy and wield power, influence in the society. Because let's look at the allegations made by the women wrestlers against the former president of the Wrestling Federation of India. It took so much time for the police to ultimately file a case. So this Me Too movement also gave courage to women to speak. And then the report of this Hema Committee also gave encouragement to the women to come out and share their ordeal, their experiences of sexual misconduct at the hands of the powerful men. And now a special investigation team has been constituted by the state government to look further into these allegations. And not just about this, look at what happened in Kolkata at a hospital where a woman doctor was brutally raped and murdered. Let's not forget what happened in Badlapur, where 2 school children were assaulted by the attendant. All these point out to onus, as Prime Minister Mr. Modi says, should not only be on the government, but should also be on the society. And this is not something new which is happening. Every now and then, an incident happened, a horrific crime happens, and then that shakes the conscience, the collective conscience of the society. For example, the year was 1973. We may speak about the brutal rape and murder of a woman doctor in Car Hospital in Kolkata. But let's not forget something happened in 1973. Aruna Shanbag. A young nurse who was working at the King Edward Memorial Hospital in Mumbai. She was brutally assaulted, hit by the iron rod, and which rendered her into a permanent vegetative state. It was this incident which ultimately paved way for a case in the Supreme Court. And in a landmark case, Aruna Shanbag case in the year 2011, the Supreme Court said right to life with dignity is also a fundamental right under Article 21 of the Constitution. It was in this case that passive euthanasia was legalized by the Supreme Court. And what is this passive euthanasia? If there is an external device which is used to keep the patient alive, for example, the patient is in a permanent vegetative state, there is no hope, no chance of survival. If not today, tomorrow, after some time, after some years, the patient will die because there is no hope for recovery. And if you are making this patient survive by putting this patient on a ventilator support, on an external device, and if you switch off this external support, the patient will die. This is passive euthanasia, where you cut off, switch off an external device which is used to keep the patient alive. If you turn that off, the patient will die. This is passive euthanasia. This was legalized by the Supreme Court in 2011. Yet Aruna Shanbhag could not get the benefit of this judgment. Why? Because the court said, who has to take this decision? If the patient herself cannot take the decision, then the decision should be taken by the family. But there was no family of Aruna Shanbhag. Now the court had to decide who is the next best friend of Aruna Shanbhag. Is it Miss Pinky Virani, who claims that she is friend of Aruna Shanbhag, who filed this petition in the court? Or is it the nurses of King Edward Memorial Hospital who were taking care of Aruna Shanbhag all these years? And the court finally said it is the nurses of the King Edward Memorial Hospital who will be deemed as the next best friend of Aruna Shanbhag, since they are not in agreement to have mercy killing of Aruna Shanbhag, to practice passive euthanasia or Aruna Shanbhag. Ultimately, this petition was dismissed. And in 2015, after more than 40 years, Aruna Shanbhag died, and the cause of her death was pneumonia. Why this episode is important for you to relive? Because doctors, women, particularly in public places, are vulnerable. We have a Nirbhaya fund which was constituted after the horrific gang rape of Nirbhaya in 2012. But most of this fund is used for setting up CCTV cameras. That's it. Not for other areas of women's safety. And this is where the onus lies on society. How? We have to shun apathy. If we shun apathy, it will encourage women to come out and share their stories of sexual misconduct, share their stories of sexual harassment. That will embolden more men, more women to come out and speak against those who committed atrocities over them. Because if a woman today comes out with her story of sexual misconduct, we criticize her. We tell her that maybe she is at fault. We judge the character of a woman by the length of her skirt, by the length of her dress. That apathy, societal apathy, needs to change, because that is how we can encourage more and more women to speak. And then the focus should also be on the government. How to create safe places for women to work. How to ensure that there is more and more participation of women in the labor force. How to ensure that women are feeling safe at the workplaces. How to ensure that internal complaints committee are set up by every single employer so that women can report to ICC and file cases of sexual harassment. It is the combined effect and combined effort by the society and government that will go a long way in assuaging the concerns of the women, in ensuring that women deserve justice that they rightfully deserve. They get justice that they rightfully deserve. That is what you need to understand from this newspaper article. Now let's look at another important editorial, no more delays. Census, normally conducted every 10 years by the Registrar General and Census Commissioner. And this department is under the Ministry of Home Affairs. Census is conducted in India under the Census Act of 1948 as well as the census rules of 1990. Although it is a decadal exercise, that means conducted every 10 years, But there is no law which mandates that census necessarily has to be carried out every 10 years. Unlike Japan or United States, for example, where the laws or the constitution mandate that census should be carried out every 10 years or every 5 years. In India, there is no law which mandates that census should be carried out every 10 years. But normally we would. The year was 1872 when census was carried out in India for the first time. But it was a non-synchronous census. That means not conducted in the entire country at the same time. It was conducted in some areas, later on in some other areas, but not conducted at the same time in the entire country. The first synchronous census carried out in the entire country at one time was carried out for the first time in 1881. And since then, this census is carried out every 10 years. Till the census of 1931, caste would also be captured. That means details about an individual's caste would also be captured in this census. But when the census was carried out next in 1941, caste was not enumerated. Why? Because 1941 was the time when the World War II was ongoing. The government wanted to reduce the expenditure on census exercise as much as possible because that money can be used to fund war. And then after the independence, after the enactment of the Constitution, since 1951, census has been carried out regularly after the interval of 10 years, every decade in India. But the last census was carried out in the year 2011. Although the census was required to be carried out in 2021 because it is a decadal exercise, but it was not conducted in 2021. Why? Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, when the world was under a lockdown. But since then, it has been indefinitely postponed. This editorial says that out of 233 countries, India is one amongst 44 countries not to have conducted census in this decade. That means other countries, despite COVID-19 pandemic, despite lockdown, they have carried out this exercise of eliminating the population. But India has not, along with 44 other countries. And which are these countries? Those countries which are under turmoil. For example, Syria. For example, Afghanistan. For example, Myanmar. For example, Ukraine. For example, Sri Lanka. For example, countries in the sub-Saharan Africa. And this editorial says that without any delay, we should be carrying out census. Why? Because it is important. Why it is important? Let's understand. Census is normally carried out in two phases. The first is house listing, or also known as the housing census, and then it is the population enumeration. So first what you basically do, you understand and you list all the buildings, households, all these buildings, households, they are identified. That is how we can get the picture. How many Indians are living in the kacha houses, how many Indians are living in the pakka houses as well. So that is the first stage. Then comes the second stage where population is enumerated, where we basically identify these houses and then go inside these houses and ask the questions to the people. Questions such as, what is your age, marital status, religion, whether you belong to scheduled caste or scheduled tribe. So even this data is captured. But sir, then why are political parties demanding caste census? This census that we conduct captures only the data so far as whether you are SC or ST. It does not capture other backward classes caste data. That is why the demand by the political parties is that we should be conducting caste census so that we can capture data related to OBCs as well. Other data such as what is your mother tongue, what is your education level, what is the economic activity that you participate in, migration, because there is migration from villages to cities, there is intrastate migration, interstate migration, what is the fertility for female, all this information is collected. And this information is then used for various important schemes. For example, for National Food Security Act. That's how we can identify the beneficiaries of this act. Unless and until we have the updated data, we cannot have policies and programs in place. Because for every policy, if we need to allocate funds, we also need to understand how many beneficiaries are there for this policy. And how can we identify how many beneficiaries are there for this scheme, for this policy, for this program? By looking at the latest population figures. But the latest population figures that we have is of 2011. That is why this editorial says, without delay, we should be carrying out census, which is under the administrative control of the Ministry of Home Affairs, the MHA. Not just that, census is also required for something else. If you look at 73rd Amendment and 74th Amendment to the Indian Constitution, which talks about the creation of Panchayati Raj institutions in rural areas, urban local bodies in urban areas, municipalities, municipal corporations, there we have reservation for SCs and STs. And what is the proportion of that reservation? In proportion to their population. So unless and until we know the proportion of the population of SCs and STs, we can't have the adequate representation, adequate reservation for them in Panchayati Raj institutions and municipalities. For that reason also we need census. The Women's Reservation Act, 106th Constitutional Amendment Act has been passed. But when will this law enter into force? When are we going to provide 33% reservation for women in Lok Sabha and the state legislative assemblies? When the census is carried out. Because after census there will be delimitation. And what is this delimitation? Redrawal of the electoral boundaries of India. That means the entire country is to be divided into constituencies. For that, population plays a very important role. Because delimitation has been carried out in India 4 times. After the census of 1951, after the census of 1961 in 1963, after the census of 1971 in 1973, and then after the census of 2001 when delimitation was carried out in the year 2002. And as soon as delimitation is carried out, which means if the population increases, corresponding to that there should be increase in the number of seats to Lok Sabha as well. We saw increase in the number of seats after the census of 51, 61, 71. But we saw the increase in the number of seats, particularly in the northern India, because the population growth mushroomed in the northern India. This is where the southern states protested, because southern states approached Prime Minister Srimati Gandhi and told her that you are basically disincentivizing us, the southern states, because we have successfully implemented family planning programs, because of which we have been in a position to better control the population in India, in our southern states. But in the northern states, in the so-called Bimaru states of Bihar, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, these states have not been in a position to control the population, which means the population there is increasing. And corresponding to that, there is increase in the number of seats for these states as well in Lok Sabha. Southern states thought that if this continues, if this policy continues, then after census there is delimitation, which means after census there will be increase in the number of people, population in the northern India as compared to southern India. The southern states will lose their voice in Lok Sabha. And that is how Constitution was amended. 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act was passed. The year was 1976. The Parliament said no further delimitation till the year 2001. Because in 2001, when the new census will be carried out, after that there will be delimitation. But then the number of seats will not increase, because number of seats will remain frozen till 2026, which is when we hope that we will stabilize our population. But then this delimitation exercise was carried out in 2002 as well. But that is what we call internal delimitation. That means overall seats will not increase. But within the state, we will divide constituencies in such a manner that in one constituency, we don't see massive population as compared to another constituency, massive number of voters as compared to another constituency. So at least within the state, we can respect, we can follow one person, one vote. But now this delimitation is to be carried out after 2026. This Hindu editorial says that why is the census delayed? Is it deliberate on part of the government? Because the government wants to first conduct delimitation? Because that would be harmful, according to this editorial, for public policy. That will be harmful in our relations with the states as well. Long story short, the census should be carried out without delay. It is argued that the government is considering incorporating caste-related questions as well when it comes to census exercise. So what we used to capture till 1931 census, every caste detail as well, that the central government is mulling in the upcoming census. But this editorial says that caste enumeration should not hold the census from being undertaken quickly. In the year 2011, socio-economic caste census was carried out. But this was not carried out by the officer of the Registrar General and Census Commissioner, which is under the MHA, Ministry of Home Affairs. In rural areas, it was carried out by the Ministry of Rural Development. In the urban areas, it was carried out by the Ministry of Urban and Poverty Alleviation. And then there were errors. Although this socio-economic caste census of 2011 was the first paperless census carried out, paperless exercise carried out, because handheld tablets were used for capturing information. But then there were errors, and there were close to 8 crore errors in this socio-economic caste census. That is why census should be carried out professionally by the officer of the Registrar General and Census Commissioner, which is under MHA. And even if the government is mulling, considering that we should include the caste data as well, that should not delay the census, because this census is very important. Because unless and until we know the updated population numbers, unless and until we know the updated number of the beneficiaries, we can't tailor-made policies and programs for various vulnerable, marginalized and disadvantaged sections of our society. So caste census should not be delayed any further. That's what you need to understand from this topic. Let's look at another editorial, Unending War. October 7, 2023, Hamas crossed the Gaza-Israeli border, killed Israeli citizens, hundreds of them, took hundreds of Israeli citizens, including women, children, as hostages. This precipitated a full-blown war between Israel and Hamas. And in this war, estimates tell us that more than 40,000 Palestinians have lost their lives. But when war happens, and we have discussed this multiple times, so I don't have to go back in great details about what happened between the two sides. But when war happens, the neighboring superpowers or neighboring aspirational powers, they will not remain quiet. They will also jump in. This is where Iran, which long harbors a desire to be known as the regional superpower, regional powerhouse in West Asia, it has also been supporting terrorists, for example, Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah, and both of them are dominated by the Shias, because there is Shia-Sunni rivalry in place in West Asia as well, led by a bloc of Iran and the other bloc led by Saudi Arabia or Qatar. But be that as it may, now Israel is also attacking Hezbollah, killing an important leader of Hezbollah. An important leader of Hamas was allegedly killed by Israel in Iran when the new Iranian president was to be sworn in. And the Hamas leader, Ismail Hania, had been to Tehran where he was assassinated. We have also witnessed how Iranian security forces chief Qasem Soleimani was also assassinated in a drone attack by United States in Iraq. So this regional rivalry is playing out and rearing its ugly head in this conflict. Houthis have also blocked the Red Sea, which is an important shipment route in this particular area. And what this editorial says, that there is escalation of tensions between Israel and Hamas, between Israel and Hezbollah, between Israel and Houthis, between Israel and Iran as well. They have been trading fire against each other, firing missiles and drones against each other. This editorial says, long story short, that unless and until there is ceasefire in Gaza, this particular region will pose significant danger to the world peace. So crucial to restoring peace in this area is ceasefire in Gaza. So without a ceasefire in Gaza, there will be escalatory tensions between Israel and other regional powerhouses in this particular region. That's what you need to understand from this particular editorial. Let's look at another important article on the unrest in Balochistan region. And if you look at today's page number 1 of the Delhi edition as well, 38 killed in 3 militant strikes in Balochistan province. And now there seems to be a full-blown battle between the Baloch people and the military and the army of Pakistan. If you look at Balochistan, which has a rich cultural history, which has a rich linguistic history, this Balochistan is divided into 3 countries. One part is under Iran, the other part is under Pakistan, and the other part is under Afghanistan. For example, you might have read that in January this year, there was a crisis between Iran and Pakistan, where Iran attacked Pakistan, the Balochistan area, and thereby killed some terrorists belonging to an organization known as Jaish al-Adl. Why? Because Iran feels that this Jaish al-Adl, which is based in Pakistan, it wants to secede, it wants to separate Sistan-Balochistan province in Iran and wants to merge it with the Balochistan area which is in Pakistan. As I told you, that this Balochistan area is divided into Iran, some parts are in Iran, some parts are in Afghanistan, some parts are in Pakistan. There is insurgency in Balochistan and there is insurgency in the Sistan-Balochistan province in Iran, which Iran alleges is fueled by Pakistan, because in Pakistan they have an organization called Jaish al-Adl, which is responsible for killing Iranian security forces in this Sistan-Balochistan province. But be that as it may, this Balochistan area, which is split into 3 countries, Iran, Afghanistan and Bangladesh, Iran, Afghanistan and Pakistan, it was not always part of Pakistan. It was a separate entity. For example, in 1947, There was this area Kalat in Balochistan, which later became Balochistan. The head of this Kalat, Khan of Kalat, he announced the formation of an independent country in Balochistan. But then Pakistan pressurized the leadership of Kalat, and ultimately they signed Instrument of Accession in 1948. In Balochistan, you will see an area known as Gwadar, which is a very important port, where a Chinese company is developing and controlling and operating Gwadar port, which is also part of String of Pearls. String of Pearls, you would realize, you would recall that it was a term given by a former US defense contractor, Booz Allen, who said that strategic investments are made by China in India's neighborhood. For example, when it comes to the ports in Myanmar or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka or Pakistan, Gwadar, ultimately these are investments made by China to basically encircle India. So China is encircling India by these series of strategic investments into various ports, and later on converting these civilian ports into military ports, where the Chinese war vessels will be stationed in these ports, and it will give quick maneuver time for these Chinese war vessels to attack India. But be that as it may, this Gwadar, it used to be part of the Sultanate of Oman. But there were a series of negotiations between Pakistan and Oman, and ultimately Pakistan was able to purchase Gwadar in the year 1958. But when Khan of Kalat basically signed an Instrument of Accession with the government of Pakistan and ultimately became part of Pakistan, then what government of Pakistan did, it initiated a program called One Unit Scheme. The year was 1955. Because of this scheme, what happened? Culturally significant areas in West Pakistan, they were grouped together into a province. That means all the powers were concentrated. Centralization of powers took place, which means no federalism. That means the center, Islamabad, was controlling all these regions in West Pakistan, including Balochistan, which means all the powers were concentrated in one strong center, which is in Islamabad. Ultimately, there were a series of protests as well. And ultimately, the year was 1970, when this unit scheme was abolished and provincial assemblies were set up in various states in Pakistan, including in Balochistan. So now provincial assembly was set up in Balochistan, which means on paper people will elect their representatives to the provincial assembly and they will govern their own people. But that was only on paper. Systematically these governments were dismissed, and power was still concentrated in the hands of army generals and military personnel in Islamabad, which led to protests, which led to insurgency, which led to secessionist tendencies in Balochistan, where people of Balochistan wanted to carve out a separate independent country, independent of Pakistan. They wanted to liberate themselves. And then there was a security clampdown on that. In 1970s, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, who was the Prime Minister of Pakistan, he used Pakistani Air Force, Pakistani Army to clamp down on these protesters. Ultimately, what happened? Enforced disappearances. Baloch people were arrested and made to disappear. They were tortured and killed. Women were raped. Security clampdown took place. But that's not the only reason why Balochistan is in turmoil. There is an economic aspect of this as well, because there is a neglect of Balochistan economically. If you look at Balochistan, it accounts for 44% of Pakistan's landmass. It has significant natural resources, coal, gold, copper, natural gas. But yet it is one of the most backward regions in Pakistan. According to 2018-2019 United Nations Development Program Report, Balochistan accounted for 4.5% of the Pakistan's GDP, 14% of the national road network, 4% of its national electricity consumption. But despite that, it is still poor. So why Balochistan is under turmoil, conflict? One, because of its economic neglect. Second, because it is culturally, linguistically different from the Punjabi-speaking dominance of Pakistan. It always wanted a separate country for itself. But when the insurgency took place, security clamped down by Pakistani army, curtailed these dissenting voices, and terrible human rights violations were committed in Balochistan. But then there is China's role in this region as well. This is an important area of CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. If you look at Gwadar, it is strategically very close to the Strait of Hormuz, which is an important shipping route. And by controlling Gwadar, China wants to basically control the shipping region of this area. A Chinese company is operating in building, has taken Gwadar port on lease for 40 years. And all activists, all the commentators are saying it is no longer a civilian port, it has been converted into a military port by China. And then there is another reason to the turmoil in Balochistan. The local Baloch people feel that our demography also is in danger, because we see more and more Chinese nationals. They are working on these CPEC projects in Balochistan. So the locals have been outnumbered by those coming from outside. And despite massive investments on this China-Pakistan economic corridor, it has not addressed the perception that Baloch people have been neglected. So that is the Chinese angle as well. But if there is a Chinese angle, there has to be an Indian angle as well. I told you that Baloch people who were initially not part of Pakistan, but later because of the instrument of accession became part of Pakistan, but still they desired for autonomy, which was not given to them. Then they desired separate state, which was denied to them. Series of protests in Balochistan where Baloch people were made to disappear. Hundreds and thousands, according to estimates, 7,000 people have been made to disappear in Balochistan, enforced disappearances. Neighbor of this area is Afghanistan. Listen to me carefully. When Afghanistan was not controlled by Taliban, when there was a civilian government in Afghanistan after the 2002, that civilian government was very close to India as well. India had invested heavily in Afghanistan. Afghanistan parliament was constructed based on the funds given by India. In fact, the then Prime Minister went to Afghanistan to inaugurate the new parliament building, or the library which was attached to the new parliament building, and thereby gave a beautiful speech wherein he incorporated a song from a famous Bollywood movie, Yari Hai Iman Mera Yaar Meri Zindagi, which was pictured on Bollywood superstar Pran, who was playing the role of a Pathan in that movie. So India and Afghanistan relationship structured, smoothened, deeply invested after the fall of Taliban in 2001. And it was argued by Pakistan that since Afghanistan is a friend of India, Afghanistan government, Indian government, they are trying to fuel secession in Balochistan. In 2004, this Baloch movement, the call for a separate country for Balochistan or an autonomy for Balochistan, it came at its peak when Nawab Akbar Bukti was leading this revolution or movement in Balochistan. But then he was assassinated by the Pakistani army in the year 2006. So Pakistan for long have been accusing India of fueling these protests in Balochistan. So whenever there was an attack in Balochistan, Pakistan would claim that it is done by India with the support of the government in Afghanistan, because that government was a friendly government with India. But then came one of the biggest diplomatic blunders of India, one of the black spots on diplomacy in India. The year was 2009. In Sharm el-Sheikh summit, which happened in Egypt, where a non-aligned women NAM summit was to take place, Pakistani Prime Minister Yusuf Raza Gilani, Indian Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh, they released a joint statement. And that joint statement contained reference to Balochistan. And that was not an ordinary reference. Look at the reference. Both leaders, Indian and Pakistani Prime Ministers, agreed that the two countries will share real-time, credible and actionable information on any future terrorist threats. Prime Minister Gilani mentioned that Pakistan has some information on threats in Balochistan and other areas. It is a different matter if in a one-on-one communication you are raising issues. But it's a completely different matter if the joint statement, which has been vetted by both the countries, leaders of both the countries, diplomats of both the countries, speaks about these references. So for the first time, it seemed, this is when the BJP attacked the Congress, opposition attacked the Congress government, saying you have for the first time internationalized India's role in Balochistan. And now you have accepted that you are up to something fishy in Balochistan. Then in the year 2016, at the historic Red Fort, from the ramparts of the Red Fort, Prime Minister Modi spoke of support for Baloch people. So there is now the Indian connection as well. Indian connection in the sense that we support the peaceful movement of the people of Balochistan who want to come out of the regressive policies of the Pakistani government. That is what you need to understand from this topic on the unrest in the Balochistan region. Clear? Let's look at some topics relevant for prelims. Education Ministry defines literacy, full literacy in push for adult literacy. According to 2011 census, there are more than 25 crore Indians who are in the age group of 15 years or above, who are non-literate, unable to read, write, comprehend. What about them? There is a policy called New India Literacy Program, NILP. What is the mandate of this program? That each year we will bring 1 crore such adults under this program. And what is this program? It's an adult education initiative, where what will happen, these men, women above the age of 15, they will be educated. Basic education, for example, elementary levels, primary level. They will also be taught digital literacy, financial literacy, and ultimately they have to give an exam. What is that exam? Foundational Literacy Numeracy Assessment Test, FLNAT, where there will be 50 questions each, 50 marks each on reading, writing and numeracy. And if you score 33% in all these three segments, you will be given a certificate by National Institute of Open Learning and you will be declared as literate. That means we can focus on those who are kids, who are in school, and teach them so that we can enhance the literacy percentage in India. But what about adults above the age of 15 who may not get admission in a formal education system, in formal schools in India? For them, there is this program called New India Literacy Program, wherein the objective is that each year 1 crore such Indians will have to be onboarded on this program. They will be taught basic education, they will be given information on digital literacy, on financial literacy, how to operate a cell phone, how to send a message, how can you be financially independent, how can you take care of your finances, how can you operate your bank account, for example. So that financial literacy, digital literacy, basic education, because after all, digital literacy, financial literacy is very important. It's a life skill today. Otherwise, you will be scammed. You will click on a phishing link and your entire bank balance will be wiped out. So you need to differentiate between a proper link and a phishing link. And after that, you have to take a test called Foundational Literacy and Numeracy Assessment Test, which will be conducted in your mother tongue as well. Because that's another objective of our new national education policy, which is to promote multilingualism. 50 questions each on basic reading, writing, numeracy. And if you score 33% in all these segments, you will be declared literate and you will get a certificate by National Institute of Open Learning. But then, who is considered to be literate? If you have the ability to read, if you have the ability to write, if you have the ability to compute, if you also have information about digital literacy and financial literacy, you are considered literate. But who is considered to be a fully literate state? If in a particular state there is 95% literacy, 95% literacy, that state will be considered to be a fully literate state. And this has been communicated to all the states by the Education Ministry. That's what you need to understand from this particular topic. Now let's understand and look at the last column that we have to discuss from today's newspaper analysis. Report reveals minimal use of plea bargaining in India. What is plea bargaining? For example, a crime has been committed and there is an accused, there is a person who is accused of committing this crime. FIR will be filed, charge sheet will have to be filed, then the trial will go on. And the trial takes a lot of time. If you look at the latest statistic, more than 5.1 crore cases are pending in different courts in this country. So the cases keep on piling. How can we reduce the pendency of these cases? One alternative is plea bargaining. What is this plea bargaining? If I am an accused of this crime, I will confess to my crime. I will accept my guilt. And then I will forego. I will give up my right, my claim to have a full trial. Because I have a right to claim a full trial. That's how I can be decided whether I am guilty or innocent. But if I bargain with the state, with the prosecution, I accept my guilt, I forego, I give up my claim for a full trial. In return, what I will get? I will get a lesser punishment. This is what we call plea bargaining. So you bargain with the state in exchange for a lesser sentence if you give up your claim for a full trial. That's what we call plea bargaining, which means the number of pendency of the cases will also reduce. This plea bargaining is quite popular in West, in United States and other countries. But it was incorporated in India in 2005 in CRPC, Criminal Procedure Code. And it was allowed only for those offences for which the punishment was up to 7 years. That means you can't use plea bargaining for terrorism cases, for gang rape, so on and so forth. This plea bargaining, according to Criminal Procedure Code of when it was changed in 2005, it is available only for those offences for which the punishment is up to 7 years, excluding crimes against women, crimes against children, and various socio-economic offences. So if you are accused of a crime against women or children or various socio-economic offences, then you can't go for plea bargaining. For all other offences, even if they are criminal offences, up to 7 years imprisonment is the punishment prescribed, you can go for plea bargaining. But now a report has been published. Access to justice through plea bargaining as an alternative model to traditional criminal trial in India, a case study of select Indian states, which is released by Guru Gobind Singh Indraprasth University. Of all the cases settled, plea bargaining was invoked only in 0.11% of the cases. That means of all the cases disposed of, plea bargaining was used only for 0.11% of the cases, which speaks volumes about the underutilization of plea bargaining as a mechanism for the disposal of criminal cases in India. That's what this report talks about. But sir, if plea bargaining was mentioned, was added to Criminal Procedure Code in the year 2005, what about the new law which is in place since 1st July 2024, Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita? Do they have a provision for plea bargaining? Yes. Under section 290 of Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Samhita, plea bargaining has been made time bound. Time bound in the sense that within 30 days of the framing of the charges, within 30 days of the framing of charges, the accused can file an application for plea bargaining. So now it has been made time bound. As soon as the charges are framed, within 30 days of the framing of these charges, you can file an application for plea bargaining, which means in exchange for reduced punishment, you have to forego your claim, your right to have a full trial. One more aspect of Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Samhita is that if there is a first time offender, you have committed the crime for the first time, you have been convicted for the first time, you have not been convicted before, then the court may sentence you to 1/4 or 1/6 of the punishment. So if you are accused in a particular case and now declared guilty, and you have been convicted for the first time, you are not a habitual offender, you have not been convicted previously, then the court may, considering that you are the first time offender, will give you punishment which can be 1/4 of the punishment prescribed or 1/6 of the punishment prescribed. That is also mentioned under the BNSS 2024. Now towards the end, let's look at 2 questions for your mains practice. Number 1, it is essential to address the deep-rooted structural and cultural violence which puts women in a disadvantageous position. Comment. Second, in the context of India's evolving demographic and socio-economic landscape, critically examine the need for an immediate census. Discuss the potential consequences of delaying the census on policy formulation, resource allocation and governance. Please write answers to these 2 questions, submit them in the form of the comments, and let other students evaluate your answers. Let there be a peer-to-peer evaluation of your answers. That is how you can improve your answer writing capabilities. And once the session is over, the link to join my Telegram is provided in the video description as well as the pinned comment. Please join me there should you wish to know more about Indian polity. That is it for today. See you again tomorrow, 10 o'clock in the morning. Till then, have a great time. All the best. Bye-bye.